So again, the indigenous movement too, let's get that in there, and so I can score that. So looking at the indigenous movement here, just thinking about what most of the people were focusing on the indigenous movements in the United States. A few went out and looked at the indigenous movement in the Americas, like in Latin America. But overall, can we say indigenous people achieved equality? Based on what you did, can we say they achieved equality? Can we say that they achieved equality? Those at home, feel free to throw in the chat if you think so.
I feel like it's a lot more complicated than just yes and no.
Absolutely. All right, so if we say yes, okay, they got American citizenship. All right, so they got some citizenship. All right, that's, and again, when we look at citizenship, there's a lot of rights and privileges that go with it. But that's where we could probably throw in there that there may have been some restrictions on that piece. Anything else that we can throw in there? In terms of achieving equality, or if we don't want to use the word equality, how about let's talk about standard of living or quality of life. If we move away from achieve equality to quality of life, what do we think?
It should be better than what they have.
It should be better than what they have? Okay, it should be better than what they have. All right, so if we look at some of the carryover and things that are still hanging on, and it would be true in all of the, throughout all of the Americas, that perhaps quality of life could be better. Yeah. And we can point out some of the health problems, some of the poverty issues, maybe some of the, again, the having access could definitely improve. Well, like, when you look at the United States, those may focus on the United States, that group, the American Indian movement, and their role in some of the events like Alcatraz or Wounded Knee, the Pine Ridge, that type of thing. What's the goal? What was the goal of the American Indian movement? If we think about it, this movement that was created out of well, it originated in Minnesota on Franklin Avenue. What was the goal of the American Indian movement? Which we could, if we put it in context, it could be the goal of just about any group like SNCC or Black Panthers or National Organization of Women, Mexican American Youth Organization. What's their goal? Hopes. Do we see a cultural revival at all? When you did your winter count, or if you did your Google slides, your timeline. In any case, do you see a cultural revival at all? Do you understand what I mean by cultural revival? See some heads going like this way. How about a renewed interest in one's culture? Okay. I think in that, I want you to zero in on that when we look at other movements within the civil rights. Is you do see a cultural revival, an interest in one's culture, and you see that throughout the Americas. When one will look at historically, one's way of life, one's culture had been altered. And then in the 20th century, you see a renewal interest. That's part of the indigenous movement here. And we'll see that's also part of other movements, is that if change is going to happen, there needs to be a little bit more check-in by those who most likely are going to be affected. And so the American Indian movement and other movements similar to it could rest on their laurels and say, we have sparked an interest in culture and a more desire for one's sovereignty with that. Okay, so with that, that case study and having that in your mind, we are now going to look at two other similar case studies in regards to feminists or women's movement. And IB likes to say Hispanic Americans, but realistically, we probably should say like Latinx or Latinx because it's such a diverse group that you can't just, like Native Americans, you can't or indigenous people, you can't just lump them all into one group. That they are separate and they are unique in that regard. And so when we look at the feminist movement and the Latinx movement, again, this is an offshoot of the civil rights movement. And it shows, again, the scope of the civil rights movement, how it is different, and the many issues and the participants in it, okay? And so in a moment, we'll take a look actually at the activity, and you'll have to make a decision on which one of the movements you're going to focus on. Kind of give us a little, kind of stimulate our thinking here. I do have a video clip here, and it's going to be about housewives of the 1950s. All right. And if we, without actually watching it, what do we think it meant to be a housewife in the 1950s in the United States? What do we think? Housewife in the 1950s in the United States. What do you think that might mean? Come on, be sensitive though. Do we have an idea? Okay. All right. Stay home, take care of the kids. Right? Anything else that we can think of? I mean, so on the surface, that's what it looks like. Anything else? Take care of the house too. You gotta take care. Sometimes we refer to this era or that as kind of like the cult of domesticity, an idea that came out of the whole revolutionary era, this cult of domesticity, knowing spheres, we like to call spheres of influence here. All right, so here we're gonna watch a video clip on housewives of the 1950s, and it is that idea that might spark a change. All right, so let's sit back and think about that.
Even if they held jobs for a time, most Even if they held jobs for a time, most even if they held jobs for a time, even if they held jobs for
Like, was that, yes, you know, we have this conventional notion, so we'll move away from it. We have this conventional notion that in the 1950s, women's role was to take care of the children, take care of the house, and that was going to be their area. All right. And with that conventional notion that that is what they were satisfied. Once they turned 18, 19, they got married and started a family. All right. And that would be something that when I think of my mother, in that she got married a few years right out of high school. And a year later, a family is going to start. And so that was the conventional notion, and that is the view was life is satisfied. You are satisfied with life. But one thing that we know is in World War II that women were brought into the workforce. And they found not only were they still mom or still in charge of the house, but they also gained some independence, financially independent, and then also maybe some satisfaction from working. And so in the 1950s, this notion that perhaps maybe women can be satisfied at home and having a family, but also having a job. A woman is going to write a book, Betty Friedan, and it's going to be known as The Feminine Mystique. And in there, she describes how unsatisfied and the problems of being a housewife, and that a longing for something different. So it is World War II, and the whole idea of challenging the norm, perhaps maybe because of the feminine mystique, or perhaps maybe women are going off to college more, women are going into the workplace more, or the fact that there is some social movements going on like the civil rights movement that is beginning them to get them to challenge what is acceptable. Now that is also creating problems, though, when we look at, if we want to start seeing like maybe some of the immediate problems is divorce rates are starting to go up. And that is a result. That is a result of some of these new changes. And then also laws. Getting laws to begin to change is going to be important here as well. And some of the early things that they're looking for is equal pay. And not only equal pay, but then also some changes perhaps maybe to the workplace in terms of status. You know, for instance, in the airline industry, when women turned 32, they were fired. And so you had jobs like that where there were age restrictions, right? Those are types of things that people were satisfied and they want to get some change here. So, and that's what the video clip was really going to highlight here. So see if I can get that thing to work at maybe another time, or just move on. So with that being said, then let's pop in here to the actual assignment then, social movements. I know that thing is working. So let's open that up and take a look here. All right, gotta make sure I am unmuted. And all right, so I got this one. All right, and so again, this one you can work solo with a historical buddy. It can be the same one, it can be a different person. That's up to you. All right, and here is the actual activity. So let's get that thing going. And you are to pick only one of them. You don't have to do both. All right, and so we'll take a few days to work on this. And so again, World War II is going to be that constant, right? That's going to help us understand, give us a little historical context. If we want to look at what is the immediate origins of these movements, we can look at World War II here as part of that. All right. Now, like other civil rights movements in the U.S., here the Hispanic American civil rights movement didn't start in the 1960s. Hispanics, who also identify them as Americans, Mexican, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and many others, have been fighting racial justice for many decades. If you remember, when we studied the Great Depression, Mexican Americans were deported. And even here in Minnesota, we would have some cases of that, even though perhaps decades earlier, they were encouraged to come to fill out jobs. And then during World War II, we have something known as like the Brasario program that's being put in practice. All right, I've got some posters over there referencing that. And so there is in the 20th century some context here to issues prior to the civil rights movement. Again, that's important for us to understand as well. All right, so here, again, like I said, you work with a historical buddy or solo. There are two movements, and you pick one of the two. So that's your first task, is I got to figure out which one I want to focus on. All right, and you might have a connection. You have choices, like anything. You have some choices here. It's going to be worth 20 summative points. So you pick one of these up here that you want to work with. The scrapbook idea can be electronic, but it's not a Google slide. All right, so you can look at templates. If I get something that looks like a Google slide, that's not a scrapbook. All right, some of us are big into understand what a scrapbook is. It's more than just words on it. There's images in it, and it's how it's placed. And there might be some templates that you can find like that. A brochure, possibly. All right, in Google Doc, you can just create 3 columns, and that helps you make that brochure. All right, so it's a 3-panel there. Newscast, like anything, and then a 3D project, that is all out there. You know, you actually make something that looks 3D. And a good example could be like a cereal box, can be a 3D project. And the panels represent some aspect of the feminist movement or the Hispanic American movement. All right, that could fit in there. I've had some people use shoe boxes as part of a 3D, and all the different aspects of that shoe box and things inside of it represent one of the movements. So there's a variety of ways to look at that 3D project aspect. There are 4 things, though, that you need to cover in it. Of course, causes of the movement, we need historical context. That's one would say pre-1945. Gives us that historical context there. Possibly. And even into the 1940s and 50s. Gives us that historical. What caused it? The historical discrimination. How women are being viewed here. Citizenship. Those types of things. The inequalities that might exist. All right, leaders and organizations. All right, so here I would say find at least 3 leaders or organizations. So for like women, there's not going to necessarily be a lot of organization. National Organization for Women is the big one now. That's going to be created in the 1960s. But they are going to have a number of leaders. And I mentioned like Betty Friedan can fit into that category. All right. When we look at events, focus on at least 3 events here. Key events or actions. All right. And when we look at that, that could be, again, some protest movements, some big mass efforts. It could be court cases, could be marches, depending on which group you focus on. And then outcomes, success of the movement, legislation. Did they achieve? Did they get what they're looking for? Did they get some form of equality? Were there some legislations passed for like women? We sometimes talk about, even though there's a Civil Rights Act that's passed in that looks like it's being directed for African Americans, there is an element in there that talks about gender, just gender discrimination, or Title IX fits in there as well. All right, and so you're going all the way up to 2000. Going up to 2000 here, there was a push for Equal Rights Amendment. After women got the right to vote with the 19th Amendment, right away there was an ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, that was being proposed. And it carried on and was revived all the way up into the 1970s. That was a big push. It failed, but what was, why might it have failed? And to go along with that, when we talk about leaders in the women's movement, there is different factions within the women's movement, some that are looking at advancing women's rights, and there are some that are looking at keeping it the status quo. Phyllis Schlafly would be an example of that. And there was a movie that came out not too long ago about her, because she had just recently passed away. When it looks at leaders and organizations for the Hispanic American movement, there are going to be a number of them. There are going to be a number of them out there. They are very vast, very different, and very regional as well. Okay, so resources, of course, we've got a lot of attachments here, not only links here, but then also with the assignment itself. All right, so you should have plenty of information there. All right, and of course you got the BHQ, which is very important. I don't want you to forget about the BHQ. Some have forgot about that with the indigenous movement. Please do not forget about that there. This will be due Wednesday. If you're doing it on paper, you'll bring it to me on Thursday. All right, but it is due Wednesday. All right, so a little bit shorter timeline here for this one. Okay, questions on how you put this together or what this is about? Questions at home? No. All right, so with that then, what I'll do is I'll cut you loose, let you work on it. We got about 45 good minutes here to get a good head start. And if you do have questions, always ask me. Those at home, stay on or exit and shoot me a message if you do have questions, all right?